Since it first became an official TNA pay-per-view back in 2019, Rebellion has given fans some of the best wrestling matches in recent memory, but it's also given us some of the worst. We'll go over the best TNA Rebellion matches in a week or two, not to worry. But today we'll be looking at those contests which stick out like a sore thumb due to them being mediocre, disappointing, or just straight up awful. Welcome to Lace 'em Up Media, and here are the 10 worst Rebellion matches in TNA Wrestling. Number 10. Deonna Purrazzo vs. Taya Valkyrie, Rebellion 2022. A year after losing to Deonna Purrazzo for the Knockouts Championship at Hard to Kill, Taya Valkyrie returned after an underwhelming run as Frankie Monet in the WWE and was looking for payback against the Virtuosa, who also was the Reina de Reinas champion at the time. This set the stage for these two to have a match at the upcoming Rebellion event, and despite both ladies being some of the best female wrestlers of this generation, their match never really got into third gear, even with the crowd firmly on their side. In fact, had this match been given 5 more minutes, it probably would have been a classic. Instead, it felt rushed and really lacked those final few moments that could have hooked you in right before the finish. Number 9. Rosemary vs. Havoc, Rebellion 2020, Night 2. Get used to hearing about Rebellion 2020 a lot on this list, as both nights weren't exactly the company at its best. To be fair, it's not the company's fault that the COVID-19 pandemic came to America and screwed over their initial plans. But what they had to work with wasn't all great, with matches sometimes happening for no reason. A prime example of this is when future Knockouts tag champs, Rosemary and Havoc, fought each other for no apparent reason other than we need a women's match on the card. The action isn't too memorable, as the focus is more centered around Ohio wrestler Nevaeh, who makes her TNA debut near the end of this match. Both Havoc and Rosemary do their best, but the fact there's no stakes or story going into this match, and the fact it's happening to absolute silence, makes it almost tough to watch. Number 8. Joe Hendry vs. Rich Swann, Rebellion 2024. After months of being on a losing streak, Rich Swann was confronted by TNA's newest acquisition, AJ Francis, about joining forces, which ultimately happened during a match between Francis and Joe Hendry on Impact, thus leading to this match. In all honesty, the action itself wasn't too bad between Swann and Hendry. However, this match makes it on the list due to the overbooked nature of the finish, which sees outside involvement between Francis and football star Shawn Merriman before the latter randomly turns heel and allowing Swann to pick up the victory. Also, Joe Hendry doesn't even get a proper entrance or much crowd reaction. Instead, we see a horrible AI version of Rich Swann and AJ Francis dancing to Hendry's theme song on the screen, and then suddenly Joe is just in the ring. Crazy to think this is the same man who will be a week or two away from becoming a viral sensation and the most popular wrestler in 2024. Number 7. Michael Elgin vs. Moose vs. Hernandez, Rebellion 2020, Night 2. The original main event going into this show was to see Tessa Blanchard defend the Impact World Championship against Eddie Edwards and Michael Elgin, but a certain pandemic prevented Blanchard and Edwards from traveling. Instead, fans got Elgin competing in a match with Moose, who came out with the TNA World Championship and promised to defend the gold before Hernandez came out. And suddenly we had a 3-way match on our hands. All 3 men give it their all, but again the lack of a crowd and the randomness of this match being thrown together couldn't save it from capping off one of the worst Rebellion events in company history. Number 6. Joseph P. Ryan vs. Cousin Jake, Rebellion 2020, Night 2. The hashtag Speaking Out movement exposed a seedy underbelly within the wrestling world, and many wrestlers had their sinister crimes revealed, with the biggest being former indie wrestler turned TNA signee, Joey Ryan. When Ryan was one of several names implicated, his time in TNA was finished and he basically was blackballed from all major wrestling promotions, which makes this match between Ryan, dressed like a sleazy substitute teacher, and the future Jake something even more difficult to watch. The action was by the numbers and lasted almost 11 minutes, with Ryan picking up the win before the whole speaking out thing made him persona non grata. Moving on. Number 5. The 8-Team Elimination Challenge, Rebellion 2022. The 2020s have been on and off for TNA's tag team division, with several teams like the ABC, the North, and the Motor City Machine Guns being highlights in the division. On the other hand, there were teams no one wanted to see as champions again. Case in point, the Good Brothers. So with all that said, the company decided to throw most of their tag team division and a few others into the first and only 8-Team Elimination Challenge, with the major players eliminating the thrown-together team of Jordynne Grace and W. Morrissey. The Good Brothers eliminating most of the competitors in the match, and the final two teams ended up being Heath and Rhino versus Violent by Design, with VBD retaining their titles. The match lasted a ludicrous 32 minutes, but it felt like an hour, and it only showed how lackluster the tag division was at the time despite all the talent that were involved. Number 4. Johnny Impact vs. Brian Cage, Rebellion 2019. Brian Cage and Johnny Impact's second outing for the Impact World Championship was going great, with the fans enjoying every bit of the action, but then things got terrifying when Impact hit a Spanish fly off the entrance ramp onto the floor, seriously injuring Brian Cage's back. This led to the wrestlers and special guest referee Lance Storm having to rush to the finish, as Cage could barely be able to hit any of his moves without exacerbating the injury, and this led to a lot of run-ins and a ref bump being added into the mix. Cage was able to secure the win and become the new world champion, only to have Big Mike Elgin come in and hit him with an Elgin bomb, because apparently Cage's back didn't go through enough punishment. Number 3. Ken Shamrock vs. Sami Callihan, Rebellion 2020, Night 1. Poor Sami Callihan couldn't buy himself a win at Rebellion, as he suffered loss after loss at TNA's annual April event. But this might be the worst. Callihan battled former NWA and Intercontinental Champion Ken Shamrock, who was still riding high from his shocking 2019 return to wrestling. The main event of Rebellion 2020 Night 1 wasn't the worst cinematic match to happen at the time, but it also wasn't great, as seeing 50-something-year-old Ken Shamrock get the better of Sami Callihan borders on disbelief even for pro wrestling standards. Plus, Sami also turns on his boys in Ohio versus everything for some unknown reasons in the middle of the match. Then the audio gets cut out before the match then takes place in a parking lot where Shamrock beats Sami via technical knockout. From being the world champion a few months ago to this, has to be a low point in Sami's career. Number 2. Scarlett Bordeaux vs. Rohit Raju, Rebellion 2019. The inaugural Rebellion pay-per-view had more than its share of incredible action, but it also gave us two of the worst matches in the show's history. We've already mentioned the world title bout between Cage and Impact. However, that match was bad due to an injury that curtailed the rest of the bout. This match between Rohit Raju and Scarlett Bordeaux, on the other hand, was just bad in general. First off, the storyline going into this was very outdated, with a male wrestler being misogynistic to the female wrestler, which seems completely out of place for TNA Wrestling even in 2019. Second, the match nearly didn't happen because Rohit was almost fired by one of the higher-ups at Anthem Sports because Raju and Scarlett were building hype for their match on Twitter, but nobody informed that Anthem executive prior that the whole thing was a work. And third, the match itself was nothing special, which is made all the worse when you consider that this was Scarlett's only pay-per-view match in the company, not including any knockouts knockdown shows, as she and her then-boyfriend, Killer Kross, would be gone before the end of the year. Thankfully, Rohit was able to salvage his career with an incredible run as X-Division champion during the pandemic, because this match and the stop-start booking of the Desi Hit Squad could've left him getting his walking papers sooner than he did. It's easily one of the worst matches on the card, but it's not the worst match to take place at Rebellion. That would be Number 1. Steph De Lander vs. Jordan Grace, Rebellion 2024. As bad as Rohit vs. Scarlett ended up being, at least it didn't involve the participants fighting for one of the most prestigious titles in professional wrestling. Such was the case with this Knockouts title match between Steph De Lander and defending champion Jordan Grace. Like some of the entries on this list, the action isn't all that notable, which is shocking considering that it includes Jordan Grace. But much like the previously mentioned Rich Swann vs. Joe Hendry match, this bout suffers from a lot of outside interference, except some of the interference in this bout makes absolutely no sense. De Lander's hired guns in Jason Hotch and John Schuyler try to help Steph win the belt until they were stopped by PCO, for some reason, which leads to SDL trying to seduce PCO, but it doesn't work. Then Big Con, PCO's rival at the time, shows up and attacks both PCO and Grace before Sami Callihan returns to even the odds before Grace manages to hit her finisher on Steph to retain the title. A confusing mess in the final act of a match that wasn't all that great to begin with. SDL and Jordan Grace's 2024 title bout is our pick for the worst Rebellion match of all time.